Respiration is a luxury. In the underwater megalopolis of Abyssal Core, built 6 miles beneath the surface of the Pacific, the law of physics had been replaced by the law of the ledger. Aero-Corp, the mega-corporation that funded the city's construction, didn't just build the walls, they owned the atmosphere. Every lungful of oxygen was metered, tracked by a chip embedded in your throat, and billed to your credit account at the end of every hour. If you ran out of money, this smart valve in your neck simply closed. We called it the Gasp-Debt. Thousands of the poor lived in the flooded lower rim, wearing scrap rebreathers, and fighting over canisters of recycled, stale CO2. To the board of directors, we were just unprofitable breathers. They believed that by controlling the very air we needed to survive, they had achieved the ultimate form of corporate dominance. They assumed that a man who is suffocating doesn't have the energy to fight back. They thought the biology of the lung was their greatest weapon. They assumed that because we were dependent on their filtration towers, we would eventually crawl to them for a few more minutes of life. They believed that by turning the city into a pressurized cage, they had eliminated the possibility of dissent. They were catastrophically wrong. They forgot that the first instinct of any animal being choked is to tear the throat out of its attacker. They assumed we wanted to live. They forgot that we'd rather die in the light of an explosion than live in the darkness of their debt. If Aero-Corp wanted to put a price on the wind, we decided to give them a storm they couldn't afford to manage. We created the Atmospheric Breach Protocol, and we birthed the Oxygen Rebels. We don't use high-tech filtration. We use gutter suits, heavy, lead-weighted industrial diving frames reinforced with scavenged titanium. Our weapons aren't elegant. We use pressure spikes and pneumatic hammers, tools designed to crack the city's outer hull, repurposed to crack the enforcers' helmets. We don't fight for territory, we fight for the valves. Our primary targets are the oxygen silos, the massive gold-plated tanks where the clean air is stored for the elite. We are the only warriors in the galaxy who go into battle while holding our breath. We are the Oxygen Rebels and we're about to pop the bubble. I am Elias Rusty Vane. My rebreather is currently hissing with the sound of a failing filter, and the pressure gauge on my wrist is dancing in the red zone. I am standing in a flooded corridor of the 4th Industrial Sector, and I'm about to choke the life out of Aero-Corp. The ambush started with a tone that vibrated through the very marrow of my bones. We had planted heavy mining charges on the primary seal of the Sector 4 filtration tower. As the water rushed in, the Venti Guards, Aero-Corp's private security force, descended from the upper walkways. They wore sleek, white ceramic suits with internal oxygen tanks that gave them 3 hours of clean, mountain fresh air. They looked like gods of the deep. We looked like the monsters that lived beneath their beds. Lock the exos. Don't let the turbulence throw you. I roared into the acoustic tube. The Venti Guards opened fire with pulse harpoons, weapons that used high-pressure water jets to slice through steel. A beam of blue water lanced past my head, cutting a copper pipe like it was made of paper. A spray of boiling steam filled the corridor, adding to the chaos of the rising flood. Rebels, take their air. I slammed my boots into the metal floor and launched myself forward. In the water, my heavy exosuit moved with a slow, terrifying momentum. I targeted the lead guard. He tried to reload his harpoon, but I was already in his blind spot. I grabbed his ceramic helmet with my hydraulic claws and delivered a massive, steel-plated headbutt. The glass shattered. An explosion of bubbles erupted from his suit as the pressurized air escaped into the murky water. The guard's eyes went wide, his mouth opening in a silent scream as the salt water rushed into his lungs. I didn't wait for him to die. I stripped the oxygen canister from his back and tossed it to Sarah, who was currently fighting 2 more enforcers with a jagged piece of rebar. Breathe, Sarah. We've got more to do. Those fans are starting to spin. They're trying to drain the sector. Sarah yelled, her voice bubbling through the water. At the end of the corridor, the massive intake fans, each 20 meters wide, began to rotate. They were designed to suck the water out after a breach, but at this speed they were massive meat grinders. Anything caught in the current would be pulverized. Jax. The pressure spike. Now. Jax, a mountain of a man in a double-reinforced construction frame, stepped forward. He carried the breacher, a 6-foot pylon of solid tungsten driven by a high-explosive piston. He didn't aim at the guards. He aimed at the primary load-bearing column of the filtration tower. Cover him. I stood in front of Jax, my impact shield raised. The Venti Guards realized the threat. They converged on us, firing their pulse harpoons in a synchronized volley. The blue jets of water hit my shield with the force of a battering ram, the ceramic plating cracking under the stress. I felt the heat rising in my suit as the cooling systems failed. "I've got the lock," Jax roared. He triggered the piston. Carry-go-em. The tungsten spike was driven into the column with the force of 1,000 tons. The entire sector groaned, the sound of twisting metal echoing through the water like a dying whale. The columns snapped and the filtration tower began to tilt. The massive intake fans, losing their alignment, began to grind against their housings, sending a shower of sparks and orange fire through the flooded chamber. "The silos are exposed. Rupture the main line." Above us, the gold-plated oxygen tanks were now visible through the collapsing ceiling. These tanks contained the premium air for the boardroom. I grabbed my pneumatic hammer and climbed the falling debris, my hydraulic limbs groaning with the effort. A venti-guard tried to intercept me, his harpoon blade biting into my thigh. I ignored the pain. I grabbed his arm and snapped the bone, throwing him into the path of the grinding fans. I reached the main manifold. This was the throat of Aero-Corp. "This one is for the Gasp-Debt." I slammed the pneumatic hammer into the valve head. The impact was absolute. The gold-plated seal didn't just break, it underwent a catastrophic pressure release. A wall of pure, white-hot oxygen erupted from the tank. Because it was hitting the oily, spark-filled water of the industrial sector, the result wasn't just a leak. It was an explosion. The water didn't put the fire out, it fueled the reaction. A massive bubble of expanding gas and flame rippled through the sector, blowing the venti-guards into the walls and shattering the glass viewports of the elite levels above. The premium air was no longer being sold. It was being shared with the entire city in a violent, burning rush. The filtration tower collapsed into the abyss, taking the city's primary profit margin with it. I fell through the water, my suit's thrusters dead, my oxygen alarm letting out a final, continuous tone. I hit the bottom of the lower rim, the mud and silt swallowing my legs. I pulled the emergency release on my helmet, the stale, smoky air of the breach zone hitting my face. It tasted like ozone, blood, and freedom. I looked up. The abyssal core was no longer a silent, organized machine of debt. It was a chaotic mess of bubbles and fire. The Gasp-Debt had been canceled by a higher power, the raw, unmetered weight of the Pacific Ocean. Sarah and Jax emerged from the debris, their suits scarred and leaking, but their eyes bright. We didn't need to check the ledgers. We didn't need to look at the bank accounts. We could feel the air in our lungs, and for the first time in our lives, it didn't cost a single credit. "Sarah. Jax, you still breathing?" I rasped, the cold water of the leak zone rising to my chest. I'm here, Rusty. My suit is a coffin, but the air is free. Look at the boardroom, they're swimming now. Still here. The silos are empty. Aero-Corp is bankrupt by morning." I looked at the flickering neon signs above, the words "Breathe with Pride," now half submerged and sparking. We had walked into the deep and torn the price tag off the universe. The elite thought they could own the wind, but they forgot that when you take everything from a man, you give him the freedom to do anything. Humanity has proven the ultimate truth of the corporate shadow war. You can patent the genome. You can tax the sun. You can even meter the air we breathe. But you will never own the fire in our hearts. We are the oxygen rebels. And we don't pay for the right to exist. The silos are empty. The guards are drowned. The air is free. The pressure is equalizing. The dark is cold, but the breath is deep. We're moving to the next valve.